Hi, my name is Sarah Irwin. This video is in regards to my Exceptional Children Summer 2 course. This is a reflection of my observations through my Exceptional Children class. To start out, here's a list of the classrooms that I observed at. For kindergarten, I observed at Heber Springs Elementary School with Julie Hamlin on May 16, 2016. First grade classroom observation was at Heber Springs Elementary School with Candace Parrish on May 16, 2016. Second grade classroom observation was at Heber Springs Elementary School with Nicole Baker on May 16, 2016. My third grade special education resource classroom was at Rosebud Elementary School with Amy McLean on May 11, 2016. My fourth grade self-contained special education classroom observation was at Rosebud Elementary School with Renee Jackson on May 11, 2016. My fifth grade special education resource classroom was at Concord Elementary School with Amy Carter on May 19, 2016. My sixth grade self-contained special education classroom was at Concord Elementary School with Renee Bedard on May 10, 2016. And lastly, my inclusive special education site was at Cleveland County Community School with Rachel Rambolt on June 8, 2016. First, I would like to start with my kindergarten observation. Miss Hamlin's classroom was full of color. She displayed her children's work all over her classroom. She also had a behavior chart where her students were able to clip up and down in order if they were behaving or not. When I entered the classroom, the students were engaged into their literacy centers, and this happened for about 15 minutes during my observation. Then Miss Hamlin called on her students for center time to gather around the carpets to start working for their literacy activity. But before that, what I noticed was that all the students who were gathered around the students with glasses were able to sit up closer to the smartboard in order to see. My favorite part of this observation was that one student asked Miss Hamlin if it was going to rain or not in order if they were going to go outside and play for recess. And Miss Hamlin took that question and she pulled up on her smartboard the Doppler radar and led a group discussion over the weather. The students were able to locate themselves on the map of Arkansas where they were and see what direction the weather was heading. And I really liked that Miss Hamlin incorporated real-world experiences into her classroom and led a group discussion based on one simple question. During my first grade observation, Miss Parrish engaged in a math lesson with her students. She also had a behavior clip chart as well to keep up with the students' behavior. Her tables were also categorized by table colors, so she would call on a table color for students to get up and get things instead of all at once, and that kind of avoided some chaos in the room. During her math lesson, she used worksheets, the smartboard, and manipulatives. The manipulatives were used for students to have a better understanding of how to model the different place values. The lesson was over place values. When the students were individually working on the worksheet, Miss Parrish would walk around and make sure everybody was comprehending the lesson, and I really liked that about her. She just was constantly walking and checking for comprehension. I think the thing I liked most about it was that when she was engaging her students in this lesson on the smartboard, and she would call on all the students to come up and work the problem on the smartboard, so instead of them just being secluded into their desk working the problems, they actually got to get up and do something on the smartboard and engage in the activity with everybody. During my second grade observation, I was in Miss Baker's classroom. When the students immediately arrived, they had a writing prompt on the smartboard displayed, and they began to work on their writing prompt. They either had to finish what they were doing, do their rough draft, publish it, or start on a new one. When I was in my observation, I also noticed that a student was wearing braces around her legs, and I later found out from Miss Baker that this particular student had cerebral palsy. Her desk was positioned away from any rugs to avoid tripping, and she was closer up to the smartboard in order to see it better. And she also had easy access to get up and down from her seat. And I also later found out that Miss Baker said that her students were like a family, that they really cared for each other and that particular student by helping that student with whatever they needed to get and checking on her as well. I think my favorite part of this observation was Miss Baker had all of her students come down to the carpet around her, and they used a poster to work on blends, letter blends. And she also used sounds and signs for them to remember, and this was just to help them work more on their writing, on how to write better and be better writers. During my 3rd grade special education observation, I was in Miss McLean's class. As the students began arriving, they began immediately working on their work. Miss McLean had an aide in her classroom that worked at the kidney table with 3 students, and they were working on math involving measurements, while Miss McLean worked at a table with 4 or 5 students working on a foldable. The foldable was about where they would go on a vacation, and the students were able to use iPads to research the different places that they wanted to travel to get information to put on their foldable. During this time, it was kind of hard for me to observe anything in the classroom because during this time the students were preparing to send their senior high softball team off to state, and they were going to line up at a bus and wish them off. Well, the thing I did like about this class was that they were so excited about it that Miss McLean let them make posters in order to wish the girls good luck, and so all the students were really excited to do that. The only thing that I would say is I just didn't get to see a lot in this observation, but overall I was really excited to be a part of experiencing their excitement with them. For my 4th grade self-contained classroom, I observed in Miss Jackson's classroom at Rosebud Elementary School. When I walked in, I didn't walk into your normal classroom environment. I actually walked in through a door that had more of a kitchen area with a washer and dryer, sink, refrigerator, and cabinets. So I was a little shocked when I walked in, but there was a student there with her as well, and he was selling drinks. So what she explained to me was that her students, sold drinks and handled money to all the students and faculty. So if any faculty members or students wanted to come, they can purchase stuff for them. And I thought this was a great way for them to learn money and interaction with other students and faculty members too. When I was in there, I also noticed that all the cabinets had a picture of what was the item that was inside that cabinet. So this was able for them to tell what was in each cabinet and using visuals. And I thought that was really neat. So when I actually walked into the normal classroom, all of our students were there getting ready to engage in a math lesson. She did have a couple students that worked in cubicles on the computer where the aide assisted them throughout my observation, while Miss Jackson worked with the other students. She engaged her students in a math lesson using the smartboard, and immediately I noticed her actually using sign language to communicate with her students. So I automatically assumed that she had a student there that was deaf. And what I really liked about this observation is she never lost that sign language. She kept it throughout her whole entire lesson, communicating with her students, and she engaged each one of her students while she was doing sign language as well to help benefit the student who did have hearing loss. And so it was a really awesome observation. For my 5th grade special education classroom, I was in Miss Carter's classroom at Concord Elementary School. When I arrived in her classroom, her students were slowly walking in. She had a couple students sitting at a kidney table, and they immediately began working on their math. They began to pull out their work from their folders. So I'm assuming that these folders were used to bring to their classroom of what they needed help on by Miss Carter. So Miss Carter actually gave them a time test, but in order to take that test, they were able to study their facts a little bit more before taking the test. And it was actually a time test. And I later found out from Miss Carter that the students who took the short math test were only graded on the ones that they completed. So any ones that they left blank, they were not graded on. So this gave them the opportunity to kind of get a better grade. And then all the ones that they did leave blank, they could fill in later on for practice. Also, during my observation, I noticed that she was also working with another student who was working on social studies. So she was really able to be flexible between the two subjects during this time. And as well as another teacher came into the during my observations and began discussing some work of one of her students in the classroom that he was missing several of his work. And I think it regarded some vocabulary terms, and in order for him to get it done, both of the teachers collaborated so he could get a good grade on it by getting a list together, having him type it, because the student learned better by typing his vocabulary words rather than writing them out. And I really like that they both collaborated to make sure that he was successful in his work and getting the grade that he was missing for those assignments. For my 6th grade self-contained classroom, I was at Concord Elementary School with Miss Bernard's class. Immediately the students arrived, and they were so eager to say hello to me, and they were so excited that they had a new guest in their classroom. Miss Bernard worked with a couple students at the circle table. She was working on their word or letter of the day, which was M, so they began working on M words, while an aide worked on with two other students at a table, and then another aide worked with one particular student in a cubicle. And I later found out that the student was in a cubicle because he was more hyper and had loud outbursts, so in order to keep him from being a distraction in the classroom, it was easier for him to work with an aide in the corner and have more one-on-one time. I also noticed that there was a student there with Down syndrome as well as a student in a wheelchair, and they were probably the most friendliest students I have ever met throughout this whole observation experience. And I really did enjoy this class a lot because when I was leaving, they all wanted to give me hugs and tell me bye. And so, but yes, Miss Bernard worked on different M words by using flashcards. Also, when they were discussing reading a book, instead of reading it automatically or having them read the story to her, she had them first look at the pictures, and then they went and read the book together, and then the student read the book back to her. So they slowly worked their way into it, and I really did enjoy this observation a lot. Lastly, for my inclusive site, I was at Cleveland County Community School in Miss Rachel Rainbolt's class. She was working with 4 and 5-year-olds, and this class was designed just to help them prepare them for kindergarten and for school the next year. When I arrived, the students were all eating breakfast, and being young students, they were very excited that they had a new guest. I also noticed that Miss Rainbolt had centers, also educational centers, music centers, kitchen center, reading center, and stuff like that. After breakfast was done, the students gathered around the floor with Miss Rainbolt and they read a story. And during this, I did notice that a lot of the students had a hard time keeping their attention on the story, so she had to pause a lot and tell a lot of her students that they had to come sit closer to her in order for them to pay attention. At one point, the aide stepped in as well and helped keep the distractions to a minimum. Also, she did use a smart board to call on different students to tell her what color it was or what shape was displayed on the smart board and what number. And they also went through and discussed the day of the week it was and what month it was and what year as well. And so I like that they incorporated that in the classroom. I did notice that there was one particular student off to the side playing to himself, so I kind of assumed that maybe the student worked better by himself, or I don't know if there was any behavioral problems or anything like that. But overall, I did like this classroom too. It was a very friendly, colorful classroom, and she displayed all of her children's work in the class too as well. So this about wraps up my observations for exceptional children, and I hope you enjoyed it.